Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Mental Health Family Hour. Now, today's session is all about communicating about our mental health. So I just want to first acknowledge, thank you, everyone that so far that has shared this work, watched and tuned into the first episode. Me and Dave really appreciate it. So just to give you a bit of background on who I am personally and who Dave is. So my name's Sam Tyrer. I'm the founder of a service called Change Talks. Now, for the last 3 years, I've worked with a variety of different young people throughout Lancashire and South Cumbria to try and prevent mental health issues. So Change Talks is an educational programme. I run different sessions over a period of 6 weeks, and I've been doing this for, as I say, the last 3 years. So I'll hand it over to Dave.
And I'm Dave, a mindset coach, which I describe as a personal trainer, but for the mind, and also a father of 2, so someone who has a keen interest in helping with their mental health. And just like Sam, we both actually have had our own histories of poor mental health, and that is one of the big reasons that we both do the work that we do. So I want to try and provide the kind of education that I wish would have been available to me when I was struggling with my mental health, particularly as a teenager.
And I think something that's really important on this topic, just to note that in terms of communication, when I went through my depression and anxiety, I really struggled to communicate about it. You know, I was 17 when everything happened to me. And if there's anyone watching that is roughly that age or any age at all, I really did struggle to talk about things. I kind of had this thought process in my mind that I was weak to struggle with depression or anxiety. So I basically hid it from everybody. And I really struggled to just say, do you know what? I'm struggling at the moment. And I think it's important to acknowledge that all of us are going to struggle at some point. You know, every person, whoever's watching this, whether live or, you know, over again, we're all going to go through something difficult. And I think it's important to normalize the conversation to say, if you're not okay, then that's absolutely fine. Talk about it. Normalize these conversations. And if there's any young people watching that have already seen me speak, then, you know, I've already said this to you. Let's normalize these conversations on saying, do you know what? I'm not okay at the moment, because it isn't weak. Just like I used to think it was weak, but it's not. Vulnerability and showing vulnerability is a strength.
Yeah, 100%. I'm actually weirdly opening up about this on my Instagram today is because I'm running this thing called the Month of Mindset, which is 30 different days and 30 different tasks. And today's one is reach out. And I open up about 2 stories today on my Instagram. And the first one is that actually I was diagnosed with my mental health condition, type 2 bipolar disorder, when I was 14. And because my mum was a busy woman and my dad was away from home, I didn't open up to anybody about that. The doctor, you know, we had confidentiality. So the doctor, we dealt with that personally. I got prescribed antidepressants for the first time without any parental sort of intervention or them even knowing. And I was 25 before my mum found out. And when I opened up to her then, she wasn't angry at me for keeping it from her. She was upset that I didn't feel as if I could have opened up to her through that time. And as a parent myself now, I mean, I've got a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, 2 boys. The thought of my kids not being able to open up to me is really heartbreaking. So I kind of this is one of the things for parents out there, is actually make it obvious to the kids. Don't just let them expect, you know, that because you're the parent that they can talk to you about, and even tell them that explicitly, tell them that in that actual language, and make them aware, remind them of the fact that that time will be available for them. You know, you want to hear about their struggles, because so many times, like what Sam's just said, we keep our struggles to ourselves for fear of being judged, or it's really terrifying to actually open up to someone the first time because we don't know how that person's going to respond. And just like if you watch the Anxiety Week last week, we go to the worst case scenario. So when we think about opening up to somebody, we think it's going to go terribly, when in reality, the hardest part about opening up is the first bit. And then after that, it usually opens the door to communication to begin.
So that's the first tip to start. Normalize the conversation on mental health and talk if you're struggling. I think it's really important.
Yeah, and can I say something on the word normalize as well, actually, because this is a word that gets thrown around in mental health a lot. And what does a normalized conversation mean? Well, a normalized conversation means we can talk about anything about that subject, and in a space of not really judging. You know, if we talked about football, a normalized conversation about football is you can talk about any football, any team, whatever. If we were to turn around and say, oh, but don't talk about Chelsea, that's not a normalized conversation. And that gets into the idea of the stigma around mental health and what that actually is. For me, to define what we mean by a normalized conversation, it means if someone wants to come and talk to me about like low-level stress, that is perfectly normal and acceptable and good. And if a person wants to talk to me all the way more over on what we consider to be the more extreme situations, like things like suicide or self-harm, then that is perfectly normal for that person to talk about it too. And we want to talk and listen about these things in a non-judgmental way.
Could you explain then, Dave, exactly what the what stigma is for people listening?
Yeah, stigma is essentially that, what we've just said. It is, a stigma is like, other people might know the word taboo. It's like, it's something, we don't talk about that. And because we've not talked about that for such a long period of time, it becomes the normal situation is, excuse me, to brush the conversation under the carpet. So what we normally view as mental health is like, well, we can't talk about that because it's weak. And the stigma is contributed by a lot of different things. It is contributed. There are people who don't know exactly how to respond when someone opens up about mental health. So that's one of the reasons we put this communication slide in so early, is the fact that we want to talk about that today. But there's also the stigma is contributed often by even someone who struggles, then going on social media and firing back at someone who didn't respond to them in the way that they wanted to. It took me, I'm still learning at 38 years of age about my mental health. So if I open up about my mental health to somebody else and they don't give me the 100% compassion that I want, I don't blame that person, because they might only be hearing about bipolar disorder for the first time. So I would say the best way that we can combat the stigma is ultimately to develop empathy, which we talked about last week as well. And empathy is, if someone says, this thing is difficult for me, accept that it's difficult for them, whether or not you personally find it difficult. The big one right now is the whole, we're all in the same boat. This will be something that's used a hell of a lot to sort of diminish people's problems at this particular time. And some people go into saying, we're all in the same boat, so it's going to be fine, and so on and so forth. And they actually use it as a way to rationalize. But if you say we're all in the same boat to someone who comes to you specifically to open up about their problems, what you're actually saying is, okay, everyone's got problems, therefore your problems are no more valid, aren't worth talking about right now. And that's the stigma and how it might be presenting itself right now. So I say, yes, we're all in the same boat, but we're all carrying different baggage. So just because every single one of us is experiencing the fear around coronavirus right now, doesn't mean that our individual problems in life, like the year sixes that are thinking about going into year 7, and are currently missing out on a term and a half of that sort of integration work, that is a very real problem for those kids. The same for the year 11s who don't still 100% know what's going to happen with their GCSE results. That is a very real problem for those kids. So it's about normalization. Normalizing the conversation is, if someone says this is difficult, we listen. We actually the whole cliche of you've got one mouth and 2 ears, use them in that proportion. It's like, you don't need to know all the answers. We're going to hopefully give you a few different answers and a few different ideas through these courses, but you don't need to know all the answers to normalize a conversation. You just need to say the following thing: that sounds really difficult. How does that make you feel? Or tell me a little bit more about that. And then that person's going to feel heard and going to feel accepted, and they're going to open up more. And it's the responsibility both of the person to reach out, that it's the responsibility of the person who's struggling to reach out, but it's also the responsibility of the person who is might end up being the helper, to create an environment where it's safe and comfortable. I say comfortable, it's never going to be 100% comfortable as possible as it can be for that person to reach out.
And how would you advise? So when I was struggling and I was going through sort of my, most traumatic times, when someone talked to me, I was extremely aggressive towards them. I used to try and shut down the conversation. I go, I'm okay. And my attitude towards people that genuinely cared was not great. So how would you encourage people to be consistent with that? How would you advise people to approach someone? And especially, I think, because a lot of my work is with young people, I've talked to an awful lot of parents. Now, parents often struggle to talk about these conversations with some young people. And if the young person's shutting them down all the time, they might be reluctant to continue, trying to pursue what's up with them. So how would you advise people to approach that?
Yeah, one of the big things about conversation we're going to talk about today is that it's both sides of the conversation's responsibility to help the conversation move forward. And I think as a parent, historically, I think coming into schools with you and working with kids that I don't have that history with, it made me realize, actually, I've got a lot more patience with the kids in school than I do with my own two kids. And that's the thing, is because we have history and we have previous kind of encounters with our own kids. And let's face it, our kids have pushed our buttons before now. So the reaction that we have to our own children is a little bit more automatic than it is when you're speaking to somebody else. And once I realized that, I'm like, okay, I can see where I'm personally letting my own kids down a little bit in this, because when they come to me and they open up, it's like that whole, I will put my hand up and say, I have totally been guilty in the past of when one of my kids has a problem, I would have said to them, I would have looked at that problem and then looked at it in comparison to maybe some of the stuff that I went to when I was in school. Because I got bullied horrendously. And so when my son actually the first time towards the end of primary school came to me and talked about bullying, when he described to me what was happening to him, I immediately went into that thing where I compared my experience of being bullied to his and thought, oh, well, I survived mine, and this is, mine was worse than this. And we put all this up. What we've got to do is understand that actually each individual person's problems are 100% real, and they're real to them. They're real to where that person is in that point in their life. So I can only say that my problems in school, I survived them now, looking back. I didn't think I was going to survive them when I was there. They were everything. That was all I didn't have, 20 years worth of hindsight to look back at them on. So if I go back into the mindset of what was I like when I was 11 or 12 or 13, what type of thing was I doing? Because the whole cycle does tend to continue, that our parents treat us a certain way, and then we think, as kids, we go, oh, I'm never going to treat my kids that way. I can't believe my parents said that. And then we go on and say the same things. The whole school's the best day of your life expression. Understand that for your child, that situation that they are in is difficult. And it doesn't matter that for you, like making sure the mortgage is paid, making sure the gas is paid, making sure you get to work on time, trying to figure out how, like, all these thousands of different angles in which stress seems to come in as a parent. It doesn't matter that maybe your child is experiencing stress from maybe one predominant source, and it could just be, a kid on the bus that kind of pokes them in the back of the head persistently every single day on the school. Like, that chips away at a kid. So it can be a lot of times that the kid wants to feel like you understand and empathize, and wants to feel like you accept that their problems are real. And I would say start with that. But in terms of when you are asking them, if they don't respond to you in the first time, and they go into, like, they snap back at you, well, we'll sort of get into that in the tennis match from hell conversation on the next slide. But the idea is we actually take responsibility and say, right, how can I de-escalate this situation? If my child is getting angry, we tend to go back with anger, right? And that tends to add fuel to the fire, and the whole thing ends up in the same way. But we'll go into that a little bit more when we talk about the tennis match thing on the next slide.
And I think something that I advise to families, especially with young children, is having dedicated no phone times to normalise conversations with each other sat around the dinner table. Because I find that, so frequently now, well, what I get told from parents is children will come home and they'll sit behind the phone screens, their Xboxes, and they're not engaging with these conversations. So if you can start that from a young age and be continuous with that, I do think that will really, really help.
Yeah.
Is there anything, Dave, that you want to touch on this first slide before we move on from it?
No, well, there's one thing that I put at the end of this slide is saying what you mean and meaning what you say. And actually, for anyone who's watching the replay on this, we've actually got 52 people watching live right now, which could end up, because it could be schools, so it could be a lot more than 52. If you are watching live and you have anything that you want to, add to this conversation or questions you want to ask, please use the chat on Twitch. If you're rewatching this later, there's no comments on YouTube because we've got this content marked as safe for kids. But you can email us on the address that's at the bottom of the main slide there. But the ones I want you to think about if you're rewatching this right now is, what are the first words that come to mind when we talk about physical health? and what are the first words that come to mind when we talk about mental health. So if you're rewatching this, have a little pause and maybe go and think about those. If you're watching it live, we're obviously going to go into it a little bit. But Sam, for example, when I say physical health in front of a school, what are the type of answers that come back then?
Gym, your body, nutrition, all these type of things. Whereas when you say mental health, obviously it tends to be more negative things, depression, suicide, self-harm. They never mention joy, happiness, gratitude.
Exactly. Yeah. No, like that's the thing is we always, when we think physical health, we do get the odd person that'll say being overweight or injury or something like that. So we do get the odd person that goes towards what is perceived as a more negative. I don't want to call them more negative, but perceived as more negative views. You might get illness come up when you talk about physical health, but it's very rare. Most kids talk about, when we ask this in schools, they talk about exercise and good nutrition. And, some of them will say like having a six pack and stuff like that. They'll have seen Men's Health and they'll think that's important. So, but when we go into mental health, no one comes back and says, like someone who's really intelligent or someone who comes up with really great ideas or someone who's creative, because all of those are good. Well, like, the more good end of the mental health, or just happiness, as you said, happiness, I suppose, and contentment is some of the things that we consider to be, good mental health. So I've moved the slide on at our end, which is when we're going on to some common communication issues. Is there anything you want to say on this before we jump in?
No, I'll let you go straight into it, Dave.
Okay, cool. So the first point on this is jumping in with the fix. That is, we often think when someone opens up to us about mental health that we need to fix the person. And I say fix in inverted comments because you don't need fixing because you're not broken. But what I mean by that is as soon as someone opens up to you, it is so common. And, if you find yourself doing this yourself, honestly, I want to tell you that there is just, whenever we talk about this in a room full of people, this is one of the most common things that people actually will admit to, is the fact that when someone tells us, we want to be able to give them an answer there and then. We want to be able to give them a solution. And that's built into us. That's sometimes the fact that we can see the person that's with us and they're uncomfortable or they're unhappy and we want to make them happy. And that can be about their happiness, but it can also be about us not being okay with sitting with uncomfortable situations. But ultimately we want to try and fix. So what we often do, before we've even heard what the person is actually saying, we jump in with a solution. And you'll often find that if we do that too early, the person's still not told their story, still not opened up, and feels that the answer that you've come back with doesn't quite fit with what they're actually looking for. Now, it's much better to help a person to find their own answers. So you're actually better off asking additional questions than you are offering a solution. And this comes from someone who has his job is around offering solutions. Some of the best ways I help people with solutions is the question that's at the very end of this. So that's what I would say is the first thing when someone opens up to you. Ask more questions. Ask questions like, how does that make you feel? How long has this been going on for? And and also trying to avoid closed questions. Like if you say, is there anyone else you can talk to about this? People go to either a yes or no. Whereas if you say, who else could you talk to about this? People then start looking for a specific person. It's a very subtle change in the words you use, but it'll help a person towards that. Like, who else could you open up to about this? Often when you ask a person that question who a minute earlier has said, oh, there's no one, they'll turn around and say, oh, actually, my auntie was really good at talking to about this, and so on and so forth. Then the second point on this is the tennis match from hell, which is what we just, I suppose we just talked about a little bit. How many times in your household, whether this is between two partners or whether this is between the adult and the kids, do we say something in a specific way and then the answer comes back in the same answer comes back? So let's say you say to your kids, I call it the tennis match from hell because it's like watching the same tennis match on repeat over and over again. The first person serves it up, you've not tidied your room. And then because they've served it up like that, the return comes in the exact same way. You always ask me to do this when I'm on Fortnite. And then it's like, you're so lazy, you're always playing computer games, and you're never off Fortnite. And we'll have this entire conversation that if we look back, it's like, how many times have we said this exact same thing? It's almost like we're on a script. And the situation here is that parents expect the kids to change, because ultimately, as parents, one of our big responsibilities, if not the hardest responsibility, is to help that person to become an adult. It's to help that child to become a functioning member of society. That's what your parents are trying to do, by the way, kids. Well, that's definitely what I'm trying to do with mine. And we want that child to be able to communicate better. But instead of leading by example and communicating better, as I said before, especially with our own children, we can lose our rag a little bit quicker. And then when we go back with anger, well, the chance is that the kid's going to come back with anger and aggression too. So there's a video that I'm going to link to on YouTube about this, called "Relationships Are Like Baking a Cake." And if you think about, each person is responsible for half of the ingredients. If both of you put in the same ingredients every single time, you get the exact same cake. But if one person changes one ingredient, you get a different cake. So one person changes chocolate for jam, you get a very, very different cake. So that means, like, we expect, there's Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. This conversation does that. And what I say to people is, look, let's forget about whose responsibility it should be. So the kids are thinking it should be the parents' responsibility to talk to me nicer. The parents are thinking it should be the kids' responsibility to listen to me because I'm their parent, and that's the way it should be. The word "should" is one of the most difficult communication words in the world. But when we drop that and say, you know what can I do? How can I impact this? And it's, instead of sitting there and going, oh, I wish the kids would just grow up, I can't wait for them to get out of this phase, or whatever it may be. It's like, well, can I communicate it a little bit differently? Can I take a breath, be the bigger person, and actually go to that person and say, you know what? It'd be like, especially right now, it's like, right, we're all at home a little bit more. There's a bit more mess being made, and so on and so forth. If you turn around and said, I know you're playing your game right now, but do you think that when you finish playing that game, you could give me a bit of a hand around here, because we're all doing a lot of extra work right now to help keep the house in order, and I'd really love your help on this, or I'd really appreciate your help on this. If we said it like that, if we serve it up like that, now you may find that the first time around the kid turns around and goes, but I'm playing my game, and you're like, and then you're going to want to go, like, I tried what Dave said, I tried the nice communication, and the child responded. It's like, we have to sometimes, because we get into patterns with people, so we expect a certain layer of communication. So actually changing the communication takes a bit more work than just saying it one time. So you might have to then say, look, I've said that it doesn't have to be right now. Or you can even say, do you want to would you like to clean your room after this game or after your lunch? And then that gives the child some sort of a choice in the matter, and feels like a little bit of independence in the matter as well, which is quite nice to add in. And over time, when we learn to communicate better that way, there can be resistance to it at first, but it can, over time, it's one of those things that once you put the investment in, you'll actually start learning to communicate better, and the kids will also learn to communicate from you, rather than just, oh yeah, actually, mom or dad spoke about calmly like this. And you can even, if you need to, point that out to them. Say, look, I'm speaking to you quite calmly now. Do you think that you could speak to me calmly too? And because, again, we don't want to get into that. We make bad decisions when our emotions run high, and we don't always say what we mean.
And I think just it's slightly different, this, but you talked about being consistent with it. And I think I'm also relating back to me once again on how people ended up getting through to me in the end was being consistent with asking me if I was okay. Yeah. Because numerous people had asked once and then they'd leave it at that, but it was noticeable with how I was behaving, how I was reacting, how my weight was increasing, that I wasn't okay. Yeah. And it was because people were consistent, and they also altered their approach slightly, that inevitably led to me saying, do you know what, I'm not okay. And because certain individuals were consistent, I ended up talking out in the end.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing we do. We have to be, it's a strange combination of consistent and flexible. We're consistently trying to show that we care, but if the person doesn't see that we care by the way that we're doing it, we need to think, how does this person want to feel cared for? And that might be putting time aside for them. It might be like, if I was to sit here while we're having this conversation and just be like, yeah, Sam, looking up, look on my phone. I've actually got my phone upside down right now. That's how badly I'm acting this. But if I was to sit here and even still have the conversation with you, but just all you can see on camera is me on my phone, that's not going to make you feel particularly kind of well heard or well listened to. And our body language and things like that can definitely play a certain role, which actually does lead us nicely into the next part about how we lose the meaning in certain form of communication. Because this is what you and I talked about a few months back now when we were in the car, about how people have different expectations around certain forms of communication. And what I would say is that face-to-face conversation in a room with a person where there's everything going on, it conveys much more, like something like ridiculous, like 95% of all communication is non-verbal. So the tone of your voice is in there, excuse me, your body language is in there. The pace at which you speak to people, even the way you look at them or the way you're giving them attention, that all gives you more information on how much this person cares, or at least appears to care. Then when we go into kind of even video chat, we lose some of that, but you can still get the tone of my voice and so on and so forth. But as soon as we go to a phone, you then lose the physical. You lose the kind of seeing my eyes or seeing kind of like whether I tilt my head, or subtle tiny little things that all show us that we're cared for. And then as soon as we go from a phone to an email, you'll often find that a person on an email will, if they want to, they'll put a lot of extra words to say how they're feeling so that it's clear for the other person, because those extra words need to fill in the space of what the body language or the tone of voice might do. But you'll also get a bit of confusion at that level. And then the second we get to a text or a WhatsApp or a tweet where things are reduced down to a certain number of letters, then it gets even more complicated. It goes into the thing that I said to you. So I sent you a message last week saying, asking you to read it out in two different voices. So I'll talk about what the message was. I think it said something like, "Saw you out last night and you were looking really good," right? And so it doesn't mean I've got a crush on Sam, although he's a tremendously handsome man. So could you blame me? But the purpose of this was, right, what I said to Sam was, read that message now in two different voices. So the first voice, I want you to, if you think about this before Sam does it, the first voice is your best friend saying that to you. And the second voice is like your worst enemy or your arch nemesis, or however you want to refer to that person.
Do you want me to act it out?
Well, yeah. So have a little think about that. And then Sam, so this will be Sam doing, the message is, "I saw you out last night. You were looking really good." This is your best friend saying it.
"I saw you out last night. You was looking really good."
Yeah. Okay.
I tell you what, if anyone's watching that wants me on Coronation Street or anything like that, I'm going to have to do this.
And so that's the best friend. Now, how would the word? If you read those same words, how would you read it as if it was coming from your worst enemy?
You'd think it was how I would read it personally, or do you want me to act it out?
Act it out, please.
Yeah. Saw you out last night. Yeah, you look really good.
Yeah,
there's sarcasm coming through in my voice. It's like a side remark rather than actually a compliment.
Yeah, I'm going to ham it up a little bit more than that, because I think, like, for you, so it's like, "Oh, saw you out last night. You were looking really good," and it's an insult. It's the exact same words, but the way when it comes from your worst enemy, it's an insult. Now, when we don't have a relationship with a person, or we don't know that person very well, how we read that person's what they've posted on Instagram or what they've posted on Twitter, or if we do actually have that preconceived relationship with someone, we can take a compliment as an insult, or even vice versa, because we then fill in the blanks of the fact of who has sent it. Therefore, they must mean it like this. We make assumptions. And that is, again, sort of one of the big things, which is when I say how we change the meaning on this slide, depending on the sender. What I try and do is I try and read anything I get, I try and read it in the voice of someone I love. If I don't know the person, or even if I do know the person and I've had a difficult relationship with that person in the past, I try to turn off that filter in my brain that wants to add all of that sarcasm and sort of nastiness to it, and just read what the words are and try and understand what the person's trying to say. And so that if you do find that you're getting messages of people and they're saying that, they're saying those type of things and you're reading them in that way, understand that if you turn that filter around and say, "I'm going to read this as if I'm reading it from my best friend," then it will help a lot. And then the next point on this is expectations around changes in technology, group chat. So with expectations around technology, this will be probably hard for the younger audience to grasp, but there was a time before mobile phones. There was a time when we just expected a person. We didn't expect anything of a person, really. The person was either in or they were out, or we'd knock at the door, or we'd give them a call on the house phone. I won't get into that too much because it's the next point. But when technology moved forward, there was a point when we had messenger apps on computers, but we'd be on the computer for like a couple of hours after college, maybe for 40 minutes in our lunch hour. And as a result, that it showed when a person was online. So we thought, oh, that person's online, therefore I can chat to them right now. With the mobile phone, we have this expectation to be online 24/7. So that if someone sees that you're online, it doesn't matter if, like, right now, I would show up as online on 3 different platforms, because this is streaming through Twitch, and it's actually it's not going to Facebook this time, so I'm only online on 2 platforms right now. But it'd say last online on WhatsApp as opposed to 20 minutes ago. So people would see that and then go, okay, well, that means I should have access to Dave, or I should have access to Sam because they're online. So therefore they can give me some attention, or they can. And that's not the way it always works. It's like people can be online for different reasons. And when we expect a person to respond immediately all the time, it then sets us up for kind of problems, because we then take it personally when that person doesn't. And it could just be that person's already in a group chat that's going quite heavy with somebody else, or they're actually online but they're on a video call. That person's not going to start texting in the middle of a video call. When I work doing most of my stuff via Facebook Messenger, the video call function in that. I will appear as online that entire time. So I could be online for 6 hours a day as far as my clients or any of my friends are concerned. But I'm not able to speak to them in that time because I'm actually already on a video call with someone else. And the group chat example is, for the parents on here or the teachers, imagine, back when the pubs were still open and we could go down to them. It's like, if you imagine kind of going to the pub with your friends, having a conversation, needing to go to the loo, and then you come back from the loo, and the conversation's carried on while you were in there for the last 5 minutes. We don't sit down at a table and go, right, guys, fill me in on everything you talked about while I was in the toilet, so I don't feel like I've missed out on anything. That's not what happens in real life. We don't feel like we can't move forward with the conversation. We pick up where the conversation is and we keep going. The advent of group chat has changed that quite a lot. So when you go into a group chat now, let's see if I've got any that I've got loads of messages. I mean, I've got 56 notifications on my phone right now. Wish I hadn't looked at that.
All from me.
No, you're on a call with me. You shouldn't be texting. You should have your full attention in this. But yeah, so sometimes I'll look and there'll be like a 79 read, on WhatsApp, there'll be like 79 unread messages in a group chat. And you will feel the pressure to catch up with all of that before you get it, before you feel like you can actually now move on to having the rest of the conversation. And whereas with that, I would often suggest to people to go, when they've got in it, say, look, because that can overwhelm a person really, really easily. It can be one of those things that you look at your phone and it's like, I've got too many notifications. I can't handle it. You can get overwhelmed by those little red dots on your phone, like unread messages. It's like, it's all right when you've got 2 or 3 of them. It's weird. We don't want 0 of them, but at the same time, we don't want 100 of them, because we can either feel isolated by the 0 or overwhelmed by the 100. And often I will just say, if I go into a group chat and it's, there's been a long amount of messages coming up, I will often just say to people, have I missed anything important in that, like since the last thing, or has it just been memes and kind of banter? No one's made a big announcement or anything. So, because that's what we're worried about. We're worried about missing out on the big stuff, or maybe you're worried about missing out on the memes. But actually going back to that, whilst the phone, I said I've got 50 odd notifications on there. My phone's been on Do Not Disturb while we've been doing this, because again, that's a really good thing to do from time to time, especially if you've got like anything like an Apple Watch or anything where your notifications start coming through on your wrist. Is the fact that if I wouldn't want having this conversation with you guys now and having this conversation with Sam, I wouldn't want that little thing just going, Dave, over here, over here, over here. That actually can cause a bit of anxiety as well. You got anything to add before I jump into filling in the blanks?
Yeah, there's something that I do want to touch on, and that comes basically in terms of asking somebody if they're okay over WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat, or whatever. I always say this to young people. Now, I use this example. I say, if you're upset would you rather your friend text you saying, "Are you okay, hun?" Or would you rather your friend come over and put their arm around your shoulder and say, "Are you okay? Can I help you in any way?"
Yeah.
Now, the main thing that young people are doing now is the first option.
Yep.
They're texting each other. You cannot read how someone is feeling via a text, because if you just ask someone if they're okay, if you're a young person, that young person is very, very likely to say, "Yeah, I'm okay, I'm fine." Now, just to touch on that as well, I always encourage people to ask twice. There's the ask twice campaign. Don't just ask once if you're worried about someone. Because if I was to ask Dave, "Are you okay?" his immediate response is probably going to be, "Yeah, I'm okay, mate." And I say, "No, Dave, are you really okay?" Now, because young people are so glued behind the phones, they are more likely to text each other, "Are you okay?" And they will immediately respond, "Yeah, I'm fine." Then the friend will leave it. If you are really concerned about your friend, and this goes to any age, don't just text them. Try and go them see them. Try and go to see them face to face, because they will pick up your body language. I had friends that text me, "You okay?" I just put, "Yeah, fine, all good, mate."
Yeah,
They'd leave it. They won't come back. The people that really impacted my life were those people that put their hand on my shoulder and said, "Are you okay, Sam?" And then, because they give me that environment of vulnerability, I was more likely to communicate with them. For example, a stranger.
Yeah.
I'd never met him before, and I must have looked really upset. I wasn't crying or anything, but I was walking down this canal, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Are you okay, son?" Him intervening and saying that to my face just made me feel comforted, like somebody really cared. And you never get that from a text.
No.
It is nice to text people to say, "Are you okay?" And keep up to date with people. But if you can, please talk to one another face to face, and especially young people, normalise these conversations in schools. Start opening up to one another. And it doesn't have to be about really, really big things, okay? If you're nervous about your GCSEs, talk about it. It's absolutely fine to feel nervous. Try and normalise these conversations. Don't hide behind the screen, because I'm telling you now, human interaction and face-to-face conversation with people will make more of an impact than texting them will.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, but even if we wanted to be on, if a person is in that pattern where they text or they can't physically get round to a friend, think about what you can do. So go, if that person says, "Look, I've noticed that you really struggle, and it looks like, you've been off Facebook or you've been off Instagram for a little while. Do you fancy having a video call so I can see you? I just want to see you." And if you say like, "I'm really concerned about you," or anything like that, those things, rather than just, "Are you okay?" But I would say that, again, the responsibility is in both sides. So both the person asking, you can either ask twice, "Are you okay?" "Are you really okay?" Or you can ask a more specific question. You can say, "How are you currently getting on with lockdown? How do you feel about being in the house all the time and not being in school?" See what the person says. Even asking your friend, how's it going being around your family more often? Because you're now around your family 24/7, as opposed to having actually a break from your family going to school. And it's like, sometimes being home with your family can be a break from school. Some other times it can be the other way around. So actually ask those specific questions, because "Are you okay?" we have an automatic response for that. The response for it is fine. And if you ask, sometimes, as well as asking twice, on one side of the tennis match, you can ask twice, or you can ask an initial question. If you're on the other side of that tennis match, if someone says, "Are you okay?" and you're not, be honest. And in fact, Sam's just, I think, shared the story. It was the guy on the horse, wasn't it? I love the fact that you actually technically had a knight ride into your life on a horse. And
I say it every time in schools. He just, I had no idea who he was, but him intervening that day, I wasn't in a good place.
Yeah, well, I think as well, like, one of the big things, why me and Sam share so much, is actually, if you turn around to someone and if you're struggling with something right now, and you think there's a good chance that other people are. So if you're finding being at home a bit more times and more, and your little brother's getting on your nerves, or you're finding it harder to concentrate on your schoolwork when it's getting sent over Teams, or rather than it's being delivered to you there and then, chances are your friends are too. So actually, if you say to your friend, like, "I'm actually struggling with this at the minute, how are you feeling about about it, that person, if you just said, how are you getting on with your schoolwork, they might just want to go straight into fine. But if you opening up and saying, I'm struggling with this, how are you getting on with it? It almost makes them comfortable to open up. And that's why me and Sam open up so much. And I think this is actually quite a good time for me to share the story about when I opened up on Facebook. I opened up on Facebook 11 years ago, and Facebook 11 years ago was not something people were on 100% of the time. But I'd got into a position in my life where I'd ruined a lot of friendships by, basically being. I was horrible, believe it or not. I'm such a delight these days. But I went through a bit of a horrible phase while I was in a toxic relationship in my late 20s, and I ruined relationships with friends and family. So I did that thing. I went onto Facebook and I put, I need a hug. And the thing is, when we do that, we're often accused of doing things for attention. If you've ever been accused of doing something for attention, I will go as far as to say you weren't trying to get attention. You were trying to get connection. You want a person to actually fully interact with you, connect with you, and understand you. And also, you want a small number of specific people. So when I did that, that was an approach where I just made myself vulnerable. It was easy to make myself vulnerable on that because all I had to do was type in, I need a hug. It's like, what? 10 letters, if that, and then hit send on Facebook and then almost forget about it. But the thing is, when you put something like that out to a large number of people, every single person goes, someone else will deal with that. Someone else will deal with that. You'll get a few people going, oh, Dave's just after attention again or whatever, and then they'll ignore that. And what happened with that post is like, that was everyone walked past me as if I was, if I was a person crying out on the street and everyone walked past me. And no one responded to that post. And that led to the point at which I was, like the last time that I was suicidal. And eventually I ended up in hospital that day because no one responded to me. And there was one friend who I probably really wanted to respond to me more than anything, but I'd ruined the relationship with him that last year. And I ended up leaving the hospital and going to his doorstep and turning around to him and saying, look, Stu, I'm really upset. I don't know what I can do. I can't handle it anymore. I really need your help. Now, he ended up taking me back to the hospital, got me all the care I needed. The next day, took me out to the cinema, treated me like a normal person, normalized the conversation, and that literally essentially saved my life. Now, the thing is, if I'd have even though he and I weren't speaking the day before, like because we'd fallen out, if I'd have sent him a message saying, look, Stu, I'm really, really struggling. I don't know if I can do this. I need your help. He'd have been there in a heartbeat, and I wouldn't have ended up making an attempt on my own life. And it can feel so much more scary to open up like that to one individual. But if you say to like someone like Sam or someone like me, Sam, I need some help. Dave, I need some help. Or you say to your mum, I need some help. That person will do what they can to get you some help. Whereas if you just kind of put a post on Instagram saying, I need help, you'll get a ton of people that either just want the goss, that will turn up and be like, literally come up with the you okay, hun message in the inbox because they really just want to know what's going on. But you might find that the person that you want to connect with the most doesn't see that. And we will use that as a reason that person doesn't care about us because we do something called filling in the blanks, which is what we're talking about next. You got anything to add on that, Sam?
I think as well, something I see frequently in schools now is more and more young people are creating Instagram pages where they are posting pictures of them cutting themselves. Now, when you actually delve into that, as you've just said, they're looking for connection. Many of their school peers will say that they are attention seeking, but as you've just said, many of them just want some connection with someone because that's something that they're missing in their lives. So if there's young people watching, Dave, how would you advise another young person to approach that with somebody else?
What the thought of the fact that they might be attention seeking?
No, so basically, if they know a young person is uploading pictures of themselves,
right,
cutting,
yeah,
how would you advise their peers to approach that individual? Because this is something that is, and this is in every school. I've seen this in every, and I've covered a lot of schools now, and I've seen this across the patch. Whether young people are doing it anonymously or not, more and more young people are posting pictures of themselves, harming themselves.
Yeah.
So how would you advise, another young person to approach this?
Okay.
child doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely need to come back to that issue when we talk about coping strategies and stuff. But actually, that would be the first point I'd say. Understand that for that person, it is a coping strategy, and whether that what that person wants in that instance is a release from pain, or and this is quite it's a long one to get into really normally, but it's sometimes people do that because it becomes a trend, and because there's certain people get a certain amount of attention for it, they think that they will get the similar amount of attention for it. And again, that person is not looking for attention. We've got very confused when it comes to attention. That person wants that attention because the attention is a substitute for the real true connection that person's looking for. So I would say, if that happens with the person, then to actually approach that person saying, look, it looks like you're really struggling right now. Would you like to talk about that? And if they say no, just say, look, I'm here for you. I really want to be able to help, or even I really want to be able to understand what you're going through. Approach that person with as much compassion as you can muster, and approach it that way. I think we haven't got the time to do that topic as much justice as I would like to today. So that's what I'm just going to say as a first step for someone trying to help somebody else. But for someone who is in the position where if they are self-harming, there will be a reason that you are doing that, and that reason doesn't need to be resolved with self-harm. It can be resolved with other things. It's just a case of finding what those other things are. If that reason is a release from the pain that is in your head, there are other ways to do that don't involve self-harm. If it is the attention or connection that you're looking for, again, there are other ways to do that, much more healthy ways to do that. I understand why you would be led to that position, but there are ways to do that actually give you the relief without the harm that comes as a byproduct of it. And we're definitely going to cover that a lot more when we talk about stress and coping mechanisms, which I'm not sure if it's next week or the week after, but it's coming up soon. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to skip past the filling in the blanks, because I can go on about that for like 10 minutes, and I do want to get the majority of the content done within the hour, and then what I'll probably leave that to is the end. So if any people are watching this live and they're in a session there, we'll leave the filling in the blanks part until the end. You'll be able to catch it in the last 10 minutes of the YouTube video when you go back to it. Because I want to get into the language, because this is stuff that we can do right now. So far we've talked primarily about communication with other people, how to be a better communicator with other people. And this is about how to be a better communicator to yourself. The person who we have the most consistent relationship with is ourselves. We are talking to ourselves all through the day. Like every single time we have a thought and we react to that thought, we are talking to ourselves. And how we treat ourselves is so different to how we treat other people. So, for example, I talk about here the inner coach or the inner critic, right? We've our parents and stuff, or the parents that listen, or the teachers may remember the whole. I mean, in fact, even the kids might, the old Tom and Jerry cartoons where you've got like the devil Tom and the angel Tom on the shoulder. They've got we've got that. We have that. We have that type of thing going on all the time. Like we have the inner coach and the inner critic inside our own head. The problem is, let's say the devil character is the inner critic, and the coach character is the inner angel. The angel's not really spoken up very much in our lives. It's not particularly loud. It's like quite shy and in the corner, whereas the devil that wants to beat us up and put us down, it's very, very loud. It puts us down a lot of time. And our choice of words really does matter. So if we look at the picture that's on the screen, it says, got little Petunia here saying, when I ask myself, why can't I? Versus when I ask myself, how could I? That's a very quick language hack right there, that when we find ourselves asking the question, why can't I do this? It assumes that we can't. Why can't I do this maths test? Why can't I be as good as such and such down the hall? Why can't I impress my parents as much as my brother can? Or why can't I communicate with my youngest son as well as I can with my oldest, or whatever it might be? We all ask those questions. And whenever we ask, why can't I? All we'll see is the reasons we can't. If I said, and this is where it's different between communicating with yourself or others. If I said to Sam, why can't I do this? Sam would probably suggest a few ways I could, right? When we ask that of ourselves, the only thing that's coming back is ways that you can't. Your brain doesn't sit there and go, shut up, Dave, you can do this. And here's 10 different reasons. Whereas if we say, how could I? it does that. It starts to come up with reasons, ways I can. How could I get better at maths? How could I communicate with my younger child better? How could I make more time to see the kids? Or how could we make this time to have time without the technology? And the issue with why can't I is it leads into the question I really hate the most, which is what's wrong with me? Every single one of you watching will have asked yourself that question at some point or another. And that's setting yourself up. Again, if I said to Sam, let's test this out. Sam, if I asked you what's wrong with me, what would you say?
Absolutely nothing.
Oh, thanks.
You're wonderful.
I did that just for my ego and to get a chance to sip some water, but I didn't even sip water because I just sat here bathing in the fact that I'm absolutely wonderful.
I think both of us have experienced extremely negative thoughts, haven't we?
Oh, yeah.
I know for me personally, I keep referring to sort of my difficult times, and don't get me wrong, I still struggle with negative thoughts, but I used to think, I'm stupid, I can't do this, I'm going to fail. And what followed with that was all these negative thoughts and feelings, and then I'd cope with these thoughts and feelings by doing something negative.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a positive that followed a negative thought.
Yeah, exactly. When you think I'm stupid, you're going to do things that a stupid person would do. If I think I'm lazy, I'm going to do things that a lazy person would do. In fact, that's one of the language hacks, which we may as well go into right now. Is I get people. Every single person is going to fail at some point or other, right? Even the best sort of rise to success on a skill or a talent or anything like that involves a degree of failure along the way. And there's a very big difference between I failed and I'm a failure. I often share when we're in schools about the time that my son broke his Nintendo Switch because he got angry and he broke the screen, and I remember going in and he was screaming at himself saying, I'm so stupid. And I'm like, no, Joe, you did something stupid. You are not stupid. Because when we have the label on ourselves of I'm stupid, then we'll do things that a stupid person would do. When we have the label on or we act stupid, if we think that I'm a failure, we'll act like a failure would. And we'll find that we fail more often when our identity becomes I'm a failure. But the what's wrong with me question, when we ask ourselves that question, we get three types of answers. We get everything bad we've ever thought about ourselves. We get everything bad that anyone else has ever said about us. And the one that most people are going to get a real kick out of, we get everything bad that no one else has ever said about us, ever, not even once, but we know that they're thinking it. And I know that especially all the adults right now are going to kind of be like having a little laugh to themselves about this, because we see it every single time we talk to a room full of people about this, is that we've all done that. Oh, Sharon down the hall thinks I'm an absolute loser. Does she? Has she said that to you? No, but I know she's thinking it.
Always that Sharon.
It's always Sharon. I shouldn't use the name Sharon. She's my yoga teacher and she's an absolute legend. But yeah, it's always, we have this idea that someone is thinking things about us. Now, if you think that, social media is going to be another one that we do an entire week on, really. But if you think about social media, it only takes one negative comment to make you feel terrible. But if you've got everything bad you've ever thought about yourself, everything bad that anyone else has ever said about you, everything bad that you think everyone else is saying about you, that is hundreds, if not thousands, of negative comments. Think about what that's going to do to your motivation or your feelings about yourself. It's going to drag you down. So we want to avoid those type of questions, which is why I say about asking better questions. Go into that, how could I do this? And the question we come to after this slide, which I'll do in a sec, but we've talked about, again, better questions, asking a person, how can I help with this? Is there anything I can do for you to help with this? If you instead of turning around to someone, if I started each one of my conversations with one of my clients and said, right, what's wrong with you today then? Can you imagine how they'd react to that? They'd feel immediately attacked. Whereas if I start all of my conversations with clients of how can I help today, and it takes it away from what that person perceives as being wrong with them, and it makes it more about what they need from me in terms of help. And that makes it much more easy for a person to open up to me. So that's actually a better question, and in fact, I'll jump to the biggie. The biggie question, actually, I'll jump to right now, which is on the next slide, which is, I think, if you take anything away from this session today, this is the one I want you to kind of go to over and over again, is what can I do right now to make a step forward? This is applicable to everything we've spoken about today. So what can I do right now to better communicate with my kids? What can I do right now to open up to my parents? What can I do right now to get some of that connection. I'm looking for, what can I do right now to be better at maths? What can I do better right now to increase family time? Whatever it might be. Because this question has two amazing things in it. What can I do? Not what can my parents do for me? Not what can Sam or Dave do for me? Not what, we looked at this situation and thought there's not enough being done for mental health in schools. And if we'd have asked the question, what can the government do at that point? We'd have just sat back and waited for nothing to happen, or hopefully something to happen. But instead, Sam and I asked ourselves this question: what can we do right now to help with education for kids and families? And this was the answer that came back. In fact, that was like we had a Zoom call brainstorming ideas, and this was the answer that came back. So it's, what could we do in this moment? I didn't think, well, can the body coach with his amazing following start talking about mental health as well? Sit back and wait for that to happen. I was like, how can I impact this personally? And the right now, in this moment, the moment that we have, the one that we can control, we can't change what we did yesterday. And until tomorrow, we can't impact what we actually do tomorrow, but we can change what we do in this moment right now. So given the fact that, yeah, you might feel a bit tired, or you might feel a bit stressed, or you might feel like the relationship with your parents in the past or the relationship with your kids in the past has been difficult, what can I do right now? Like, how can I, even if it's just a one step forward, what can I do to make one interaction with my kids a little bit more pleasant? Because doing that over and over time will lead you towards that relationship being better.
Sorry, David. I just want to touch on as well. In terms of communicating with yourself, I'm always referring to personal experiences because I want to make it as relatable as I can to anyone watching. I went through years of my life telling myself that I couldn't do stuff. And I was unworthy. I'm going to fail this. I'm going to fail that. And nothing positive ever come out of it. And I kept going around this consistent spiral of turning to cope with these thoughts in a negative manner, and it was never getting me anywhere. Yeah. And it was only until one day of my dad was the person that managed to make something just click, until I started to challenge these thoughts and started to believe in myself a lot more, saying that I can do this. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that anybody watching, you can do whatever you want with your life. You can achieve great things. Yeah, I've gone from, more or less no GCSEs, no A-levels to now, I got a first class honours degree. I'm doing a master's degree. I did get invited to do a PhD, and I'm not saying this to try and to show off about the things that I've achieved. I'm saying this because I have challenged my thought process, and don't get me wrong, I still have many, many negative thoughts about, this, for example. We've developed this really quickly, and I'm like, is it going to work? Is it going to work? But at the end of the day, if I thought like that all the time, that I wouldn't feel good. I challenge my thoughts consistently for years and years and years, and I always tell myself that you can do this. And as you've said, if I do struggle with something, I will instead of saying, I can't do this. So, for example, one of my assignments is really difficult. I say, what can I do to be able to understand this more, rather than just saying, I can't do this. So, sorry, I end up getting like a bit of a motivational speaker type thing.
I love it.
I just want to emphasise on the point that no matter where you are at now in life, you can learn to challenge your thoughts and create a whole new life for yourself. Yeah. If you could see who I was to who I've become, I'm a completely different individual. And I just wanted to emphasise that to you all, young or old. Yeah, 100%. Same with me. I was bullied in school for having the audacity to put my hand up and know the answer to questions. And now, I stand up in front of schools with you and help people find the answers to the questions they're looking for. That couldn't be a nicer kind of turnaround, in my opinion, because it's exactly the same situation. I remember when you offered me the first chance to speak at a school, and I was bricking it because I'd not been back at a school since I was kind of chased out of there and beat up. It was like, and it was so hard at that young age to see past that and to see that anything would ever come of it. But, I've turned, there's a great expression I like, that your mess becomes your message. Like my mess from school is one of the big things that fuels me now to stand in front of schools and say, look, I'm here to give you a bit of help and to help you to understand this. Here's some more resources that are there to give you some help and to understand this, and to help that conversation, to help mental health, normalize the conversation, like we talked about at the very beginning.
And it goes back to the great language hacks. That is one of the ones that I really love to do is if you say, I can't do this, put the word yet at the end of the sentence. I can't do this yet. I can't do this says, I can't do this now, nor will I ever be able to. I can't do this yet says, I can't do this right now, but one day I'll be able to. It's one tiny word that changes the what you're doing. The word just or only, I only got a B on my GCSE, or I only got a C on my GCSE, or I only got a C on my mock, those type of things. The word only, let's remove that. I got a C on my mock. How can I make this, and then it's like, I'm proud of myself for the fact that I got the C. And if I want to make it a B, how can I make it a B next time? How can I make it an A next time? How can I improve? How can I make this even better? Rather than what did I do wrong? How can I do this better next time? Switch those questions around. I'm going to put a bunch of these in the comments on YouTube, in the description on YouTube of language hacks that you can do as well. So if you kind of feel like we've rushed through those a little bit there. Sam, we've hit an hour. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about an hour of what?
I'd just say let's just add on some top tips really on what people can take away. For me, it's, if you're struggling with something, find someone that you trust and talk to them about it. Okay. If you are the person that someone comes to talk to about any of their issues, be approachable, listen to them, look at ways where you can give them more support or where you can get them more support. And once again, just with people with young children, I always encourage to have no phone times because they're getting more and more used to hiding behind the phones. So basically try to have no phone times at the dinner table and just talk to each other about how your day's been. So if they see you talking about, your day might have been stressful or this upset you, that will then allow them to learn to be able to do that too.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. My top tip, I suppose, is that question. Going back to that question, which I'll just put on screen one more time. What can I do right now to make a step forward? Write that down somewhere. Put it on the background of your phone. And when you ask yourself that question, there's an amazing thing that happens. You start to help yourself because your mind is extremely powerful and has an amazing bunch of answers in there. And when you start to trust yourself and your ability to actually solve your own problems, then it starts building up your momentum, starts making you feel stronger. When we've been constantly struggling with our own problems before, we can feel progressively weaker. But with this question, what it allows you to do is to start coming up with solutions, implementing those solutions and seeing, what? I actually got this right. I did this. And bear in mind, it's not what can I do right now to make everything, all my dreams, a reality in this moment. It's a step forward. It's taking that step forward, one step forward. And if we're really glad that we've still got 37 in on Twitch right now, so we've still got quite a few people live. And I know we said an hour, but we may end up doing a little bit of bonus at the end of every single one. And the one I'm going to go to actually, and I'm going to leave the slide off the screen because hopefully people haven't picked up on the fact that the slide has a spoiler in for it. And we're going to talk about something called filling in the blanks, right? It's sometimes most of the time, our problems are completely real. They're real things that are out in the world, but sometimes we create a problem and a situation in our heads. And I'll give you a wonderful example on how you've done this. This will relate a little bit more to the older kids and to the adults because they remember having a house phone. But back in the day, we had just the house phone, and we'd phone people up, and they wouldn't. And what the first thing, if they didn't answer, the first thing we would assume is they're busy or they're on the toilet. People didn't take their phones to the toilet in the 90s, believe it or not. It's like we'd think they were busy or they're out, and we'll see them again on Monday in school, and that was it. We'd go and watch Coronation Street and get on with our Friday night. It'd be great. We wouldn't worry about it at all. We'd just be like, they're busy. Get on with our lives. Now, since this wonderful thing came along, when we phone somebody, just have to take a second to think about what's the first thing you think when a person doesn't answer on this. And the majority of you will probably say, they're ignoring me, they're blocking me, they're blanking me, they hate me. Now, that doesn't make us then go away and get on with our day-to-day life. We don't go back to watching Coronation Street. And if we do, it's like every 5 seconds we're checking this to see if the person's phoned back to us, giving us a little ping of anxiety over and over again. And we've made the problem now not about the fact that that person's busy. The problem now is what's wrong with me? Going back to that question, right? So we feel terrible. We feel that the person hates us, and therefore we feel that we deserve hate. We deserve those feelings. And then the problem, it'd be bad enough if it just stopped there, right? But it doesn't. We then go back into the phone. Oh, really need to prompt this person. I'll go into WhatsApp, open up WhatsApp. Hi, trying to get hold of you. Give us a shout when you're free. And then we put the phone down. Maybe. Sometimes we look at it. We look at it. 1 grey tick, 2 grey ticks, 2 blue ticks. And as soon as we see that second blue tick, we get a little spike of kind of excitement. The person's seen it. We don't, they've definitely seen it. With the missed call, they might not have seen it yet. We don't know. But with this, the blue ticks, they've definitely seen it. We're going to get a response. And we sit there looking at the phone, almost burning holes into it with our eyes. And no response comes. And again, now we really feel absolutely terrible about the fact that this person hates us. This person doesn't want anything to do with us. They're not responding to me. But we don't tend to stop there. We then go onto their Instagram, their Snapchat, their TikTok, and we go, what's this person up to right now? We go into the stories and we see it, and they're out. And they're out with someone else from school or someone else from work. And you think that person's an absolute idiot, and you can't believe that that person's been chosen over you. And now it's like, not only do they hate me, but they like that person more than they like me. And that person's horrible. So now we've got comparison and we feel even worse. Let's say you don't see that person until Monday morning back at school. Or like right now, let's say you don't see that person for a couple of months, because you don't see them outside of school. We feel like that person hates us for that length of time. When we ruminate on it, we dwell with those thoughts, we sit with those thoughts. And when we feel like someone hates us, it feels toxic. It doesn't feel nice. We're not carrying on getting back to our lives. We're checking our phone. We're seeing if the person's responded. And we think that they'll hate us. Now, we just don't get on with things. Now, on the flip side to that, have you ever received a message on this and you've looked at it and gone, that requires a bit more than a yes or no answer? And I haven't got time to respond to that right now. I'm just getting in the car with my parents. I'm just about to have my dinner. Mum and dad have just initiated a phone free time, or I'm just about to go onto a video call, whatever it may be. And you go, you know what? You open it and you go, I need to respond to that properly. I'll do it later. Ever forgotten to respond to it later? Because when the notification's gone, as we talked about earlier in this, communications change the way technology's changed the way we communicate. When the notification's gone, you forget. The brain forgets, no matter. And it wasn't that you hated the person. It was just that it was so important to you that you wanted to give them a proper response, but you forgot. And we do forget because the expectations on us on technology and communication and being in touch with people now are so much higher than they've ever been. And the thing is, if that person on the other end of that, or if you're the person that sent that message, if you knew that the other person was just busy and they forgot, that's a much nicer feeling to be carrying around with you than they hate me. Just like back in the day, the trick to this is once you send that message or you make that call, if it doesn't, if they don't answer or they don't respond, put it down like we did with the home phone. Go back to what you were doing before. Carry on with your life and just tell yourself, you know what? They're busy, because that was much, much simpler and much, much better, because it leads to 4 different situations, right? The 4 different situations are the person does actually hate you and you spend the weekend thinking the person hates you. That's your worst case scenario. It's very unlikely, but it's your worst case scenario. The person tells you they find out the person hates you on the Monday, you spend an entire weekend feeling like someone hates you. I actually think the second worst case scenario is that the person doesn't hate you, but you spend all that time thinking that they do, because that time affects you. You can suffer for 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, a month while you think that somebody else hates you. When we've created this, we've filled in the blanks, this is what I call it. We've created a story from the information that we have. And that to me is the second worst situation. Then you've got the fact that they do hate you, but you spend the entire weekend thinking that they don't. And you know what? Okay, that person already hated you. You didn't need to suffer for 3 days on top of it. You deal with that problem when that problem exists in front of you. But rather than assuming the problem exists, we deal with it when we get there. And the final situation, which is actually the most likely one, and everyone will know that this is the most likely one, is that they don't hate you whatsoever. And if you spend your time feeling they're just busy and you just get on with your life, you have 4 days of peace followed by a lifelong friendship, hopefully. And that's the way it'll actually work out the majority of the time. So we learn to assume the positive. We learn to assume the fact that the person's busy, and we understand that what thinking that they hate me does to us.
Right. Cheers, Dave. So I know we've gone over there. Has anyone got any questions that they'd like to ask via the Twitch platform?
No, we didn't get any comments on the Twitch. If anyone's still watching at this point and they're going to watch, you can quickly put a message in now if you've got one. But please bear in mind that in the future, if you just put them in the chat as we go, that's great. I see the chat, but I'm not distracted by it. So it's like we can look at the questions as they go rather than get to this point in the conversation and then be sat here waiting to see if anyone responds. If something pops into your mind as you're going, or if you just want to drop a little comment, absolutely, that's what the chat's there for, and that's one of the reasons we use this platform, so we can actually have people take part, interact with us. And if you're watching on the YouTube, the email address is the bottom there, dave@mindsetbydave.com. We don't have comments enabled because we want kids to be able to watch this too, and we don't want them to have to deal with a bunch of trolls in the comments. So so that's why we've done that. But drop us an email, and if you want to follow either myself or Sam on social media and communicate with us that way, I'm Mindset by Dave absolutely everywhere. As you
_change talks on Twitter.
Change_talks.
Yeah.
Yeah, not _change talks.
Sammy on there.
Sam is at change_talks on Twitter. That's his preferred social media platform. Mine is Instagram. You'll get a much quicker response from me on Instagram than any other platform, and it's at Mindset by Dave. Thank you so much. I'd normally say leave a comment and all that, but YouTube's got them disabled. So you know what? Just hit that nice big like button. And if you want to see more of this in your inbox each week, hit the subscribe button too, because we have other videos on here. The animations that I mentioned earlier, there's some really good motivational stuff on here. There's a great video called You Are Not Weak, which I would suggest anyone that thinks about that, has thought about that, why can't I do that this question, check out the You Are Not Weak video, because it talks about why can't I do this does to your mind versus how could I do this. You are not weak, the journey is just difficult. So I think that's a good place for me to sign off. Sam, anything to add?
Right. No, same time next week. It's Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Me and Dave are not doing this to promote either of our services or business or anything. We're doing this because we want to help people. It's all happened very, very quickly. We're learning as we go along. Next week's topic, I think, likely is going to be social media. I've had a lot of people email me and ask if we could talk about that. And I'm very passionate about that topic, about the negative use of social media, how it's impacting young people's mental health. So I think that could be the route that we go down for next week. I will be promoting it via Twitter. So if anyone does want to get hold of me, please message me through there. Thank you very much for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it. We both do. I hope that you will stay safe and healthy, as all your families and friends do as well. So thank you for tuning in.
Yep, thank you very much. And there's a couple of people just saying thank you in the chat now, so we appreciate that too. We will see you next week.